Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Benvenuti a tutti. I'm Ron Secchi from The Ron Secchi Show in the USA and a proud sponsor of the Italian Family History Group.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I am filling in for the President, who is away overseas. At the end of the evening, you'll judge to see if I've done a good job or not. But if I haven't, don't tell him. I won't be playing the guitar and I won't be singing. So you're pretty safe. I will be talking. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Iacono, and I happen to be the uncle of our guest speaker tonight, Beatrice Iacono. I was going to say Beatrice Mezzapica, but I won't say that. Thanks for coming to listen to Beatrice tonight to tell about the good work her father and mother have done in their lifetime. And I should know, as they were my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. Thanks to the Palace Theatre people, for all our sponsors, for their generous support, and a special thank you to our committee and helpers who make all this happen once a month. So please relax, sit back and enjoy the evening. And I now would like to ask Beatrice to come forward and do what she does well.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for coming along tonight. I especially wish to thank the Coase Italian Family History Group for inviting me to speak about Mezzapica cakes and the contribution and legacy to the Italo-Australian community of Sydney left by my father, Angelo Mezzapica, and my mother, Carmela, or Pina, as she was known. My brother Mark and I are both extremely proud of their achievements. I feel especially honoured, as their daughter, to be able to relate their story to the wider community. I've called this a testament to Angelo Mezzapica, the first Italian cake shop in Sydney, because he was the very first in Sydney. There are a lot that have come since. A lot of pastry cooks that have opened since also worked in the Mezzapica cake shop. So his history is really a basis for many others. And the story of Mezzapica cakes at 130 Norton Street, Leichhardt, can't be told merely by focusing on what Mezzapica cakes has become today. It is the story of a family that goes back almost a century to the small town of Continental on the island of Lipari, the main island in the archipelago of 7 islands known as the Isole Eolie, or Aeolian Islands, off Sicily in the Tyrrhenian Sea, Mar Tirreno. This is Continental today, and the Mezzapica bar, or the Bar Miramare as it's also called, it was known as the Mezzapica bar, but its name was actually Bar Miramare, is shown near the pier there in the foreground, and that's been its location right since it began. The story begins in 1912 in Continental, Lipari, with the birth of my father, Angelo Mezzapica, the third of 7 children born to Antonino Mezzapica and Rosaria Zaia Mezzapica. Angelo's formal schooling takes him initially to the end of Year 5 in primary school. That was the highest level of schooling offered on the island at that time. However, he goes back to complete Year 6 some years later when the class is eventually established. He just felt that education was the most important thing for him. He always really felt the importance of education in his life. His schooling of life and dedication to work, however, begins from a very young age. When he's only 9 years old, as was customary practice in many families on the island at that time, he's sent to learn a trade under the guidance of one of the local tradesmen or artisans. In his case, it's with a shoemaker. Here he learns the skills of shoemaking and shoe repairing, a skill that comes in handy at times in later life. He was very good at fixing soles of shoes and when the need arose. Following in the footsteps of his eldest brother Giovannino, He also learns carpentry, another skill that he carries with him and often puts to use throughout his life. You may not know that at one particular point that he actually outfitted the shop with the cabinets that he made he built them himself. So he was a very good carpenter, and we always had little items at home of pieces that he made for the family. Okay, this is the various stages of the Bad Miramare or Bad Mezzapica in Canneto. At around 12 years of age, Angelo goes to work in the family business, the Bad Mezzapica or Bad Miramare, on Canneto waterfront, or rather what was the actual beachfront at Canneto. And you see from the first photo there, it's sitting right at the water's edge, just on the sand or whatever it was, the pebbles or whatever it was at the time there. And the photos taken from the late 1920s through to the late 50s, where the current bar is now, this latest picture. These were a treasure find through someone on the island who actually places them on. He has a Facebook page, and he just has all these magnificent photos that I was able to find. Thank you to my cousin Odelia. This bar, so strategically positioned on the Canneto waterfront next to the pier, was a focal point for all the locals to meet and chat, and to indulge in gelati, granite, coffee and sweet treats. And it was here from this early age that Angelo developed his passion for what would be his lifetime work. Of course, the work entailed serving patrons, but that was not Angelo's main role. His main role was that of the gelataio, the one who actually works behind the scenes, making the gelati and granite. In those days, there were no electric machines such as those prevalent today. Making gelati was a laborious and totally manual task. Large blocks of ice had to be hammered into small chunks in order to fit around the churn insert, which contained the liquid granita or gelato mixture. As you can see from these images, the hand crank had to be constantly turned until the content in the churn started to solidify into an icy mass. So it was a constant hand action that had to make the granita or the gelato was made in the same way. The gelato was then scooped out and packed firmly down, generally into small individual moulds. I think they still had the ice cream cone as well, but the gelato cone, but you can see little moulds there in that picture. The totally manual process of making gelati was arduous. The constant handling of ice and manipulation of the gelato churn from such a young age had health repercussions later in Angelo's life. I'll touch on that a little bit later. So that is one of the very early photos of my father in his little laboratorio, but we'll come to that later. After a year or two of working in the family bar and wishing to improve his skills as a gelataio, Angelo leaves his family home in Canneto to look for a job in Milano, which at that time was considered to be the main innovative centre in Italy for the production of gelati. However, this dream could not be fulfilled. Unemployment throughout Italy was the order of the day. He returns home to Canneto, but he's there only for a short time. His next journey takes Angelo to Messina in Sicily. Here he lives for some time with an uncle and embraces the opportunity to take on an apprenticeship as a pastry cook at the pasticceria of he becomes an apprentice to a Swiss master pastry chef in the pasticceria of Vallone and Giuffrida, one of the most famous pasticcerie in Messina at that time. At 19 years of age, after completing his apprenticeship, he returns to Canneto to set up his very first own pastry shop. And there you see him working in the little workshop underneath the house. It doesn't take long for word to spread, and orders for Angelo's cakes and pastries to come in for all important festive occasions such as christenings, confirmations and weddings not only from people living in Lipari and Carneto, but also from people from other islands, other of the Aeolian Islands. At the same time, Angelo also continues making gelati at the family bar. During this time, around 1941 to 1942, Angelo develops a romantic interest in Carmela Pina Conti, the eldest daughter of Francesco and Giuseppina Conti. We're now looking at life in Italy during the period of World War II. Unfortunately, the impact of the Second World War spared no one, not even the inhabitants of the islands of the Isole Eolie. The scarcity of food, and in particular items such as flour, sugar, and other ingredients, which were absolute necessities for the work of a pasticcere, impinged greatly on Angelo's work during the war. Moreover, in 1943, Angelo himself receives his call to arms. He's away at war for 2 years and returns to Carneto only after the end of the war in 1945. Moreover, not long after his return, on the 30th of September 1945, he marries his sweetheart, Carmela Giuseppina Conti, affectionately always known as Pina. She hated the name Carmela. She would never want to be called Carmela. She always wanted to be called Pina. And later, Pina became mother to me and my younger brother, Mark, who is also here tonight. With Pina's help, Angelo continues to bake and supply cakes to his clients from his home-based laboratorio for the next 3.5 years. This is the next step, the journey, the decision to leave Carneto, leave family and friends and try to create a better life. Angelo and Pina's story now starts to be a shared common story, belonging to the multitude of migrants in the aftermath of the war. Unemployment throughout Italy is rife. Money is very scarce, and numerous social issues plague the whole country. These are the catalysts that push thousands to leave their families, friends and homeland, to emigrate to distant shores and uncertain futures. The inhabitants of the Isole Eolie are not spared of these problems. This is the impetus that drives Angelo and Pina, together with me at that time. I'm just a couple of years old, in 1949, to leave their parents, brothers and sisters to embark on a long 33-day voyage to Sydney. The voyage was in cramped quarters in holes on the small cargo ship Ugolino Vivaldi, and Dad's younger brother Filiberto also accompanied us on that voyage. The story of the voyage with my mother in particular, she was bedridden for 30 out of the 33 days. She just couldn't take the sea journey. So there were always stories at home about the horrors of that journey. There was a number of fellow Aeolians making that sea journey with us, all in search of a more promising future in Australia. Amongst these, notably Antonio D'Ambra and Ross Magnacci, to name just a couple, later who became well-known identities in their own right in the Italo-Australian community. This is the Natoli fruit shop on the boulevard in Strathfield. Now, one of the more positive aspects of this journey for my parents was the fact that my mother had uncles and other relatives already living in Sydney. These family members had migrated to Australia many years earlier, during the 20s and 30s, and had already established themselves in businesses, mainly fruit shops, as was the order of the day at that time. They were able to provide our family with much needed and greatly appreciated support in what would have been a very traumatic period in our lives. After arriving in Sydney, my father and his brother, Zio Filiberto, both worked in Joe Natoli's, one of the uncles, fruit shop on the boulevard in Strathfield. One of the bedrooms in the residence above the fruit shop became our home for about 2 years. Working in the fruit shop and dealing with a totally Australian clientele, Angelo was able to make best use of the opportunity to improve the English he had taught himself before leaving Italy. I told you he was really stickler for wanting to be educated, so he decided if he was going to come to Australia, he was going to learn English before he got here. So that was one of the things he did. After spending some months working in the fruit shop, Angelo found employment as a pastry cook in an Australian cake shop right across the road from the boulevard in Stratfield. The experience of working in an Australian cake shop, producing a totally different line of cakes and for a totally different clientele, allowed him to gain another set of skills. Big hope. The mutually respectful relationship between Dan Stokes, the proprietor of this cake shop, and my father lasted for many years after he'd left there. However, the fellow Eoliani who had journeyed with Angelo and who were well aware of his craftsmanship and were longing for the taste of the cakes and pastries they'd known back home in Canneto, inspired and urged him to set up a cake shop in his own name. The suburb of Leichhardt in the early 50s was just starting to develop its identity as Little Italy. New businesses were gradually being established by Italian families such as Lucchetti, D'Ambra and Sindone, and were starting to thrive. These businesses supplied Italian food, wine and other products such as Italian music, eventually through D'Ambra and the Cetra records that he used to bring in with all the Italian songs that they were used to. And they supplied this to the ever-increasing Italian migrant population, as well as to a smaller Australian clientele. It was through his Aeolian contacts in Leichhardt that Angelo was alerted to a small Australian cake shop where the premises were becoming available for lease because the elderly pastry cook running the business wanted to retire. I vaguely remember going with my father and mother to inspect the premises, which consisted of the cake shop at the front with a small dingy room behind it where all the preparation and the baking was done. Now basically the size of the cake shop is still the same as it is today, but the bakehouse at the back, of course, is totally different. Angelo was not daunted by what he saw. He was always an optimist. He would make it work. It's one of the only photos I think that was ever taken in the cake shop when they were all there. So now a new life begins. Backed by the financial support of the uncles, Joe and Sam Natoli, for which he was forever grateful and always acknowledged. In September 1952, exactly 3 years to the month of setting foot on Australian soil, Angelo opened A and C Mezzapica, his first Australian cake shop at 130 Norton Street, Leichhardt, in rental premises. In the first few years of opening A&C Mezzapica, of course named after Angelo and Carmela Mezzapica, Angelo bakes cakes for both Australian and Italian clienteles. However, his main production is Australian cakes to serve the local Leichhardt community. The production of Italian cakes is secondary at this stage, mainly just to meet the requests from his known Italian compatriots. His regular Australian clients rave about the quality of his cakes, and his sausage rolls and meat pies in particular become renowned. So they really loved the cakes he baked. He works very hard behind the scenes in the bakehouse, with some help from my elderly maternal grandfather, Francesco Conti, who had come to Australia before us. He meets the demands of his clients. The shop front is under the care of my mother Pina and one of her younger sisters, my aunt Adalgisa, newly migrated from Italy with my grandmother Giuseppina Conti and my youngest aunt Irma in 1952. With the ever-increasing numbers of Italian immigrants arriving in Sydney, the A and C Mezzapica name spreads quickly to these new arrivals. The demands for fulfilling orders for Italian cakes increase. Bear in mind that at this stage, Angelo is still the sole pastry cook, producing all the cakes and pastries. He works long, hard hours. Christmas and Easter are peak periods when he works well into the night. In 1956, my brother Mark, is born, and Pina now has additional commitments with a new baby son to care for. She's no longer able to be physically present daily to run the shop as before. Much to the disappointment of his Australian clients, Angelo, always the calm, precise planner, makes the tough decision that he needs to streamline his production. He decides to focus solely on the manufacture of Italian cakes, which he foresees will become the faster growing market. He also employs another pastry cook to help carry the load and a young assistant to work in the shop with Adalgisa. Sarà cocchetto there. Life goes on. Pina helps out when she can, and demands for Angelo's cakes increase as the word about the Mezzapica Italian cake shop at Leichhardt continues to be spread. But life wasn't meant to be easy. In 1958, Angelo's health suffers a major setback. He is struck with an extremely painful bout of rheumatism, which prevents any movement of his arms, in particular his right arm. This was his main tool for all his work, from beating the custard filling for all his torte and cannoli as the custard cooked, and it was a manual labour in big cauldron, to all the other work requiring heavy handling of trays and other manual labour that baking cakes and pastries entails. As a child, I remember seeing my father as never before, almost totally helpless in his pain, and my mother actually having to feed him as he sat up in bed because he could not raise his arm at all to feed himself. Now, with modern medicine, this condition can be treated much more easily and quickly than it was done in the 50s. I don't want to focus on this period of his life at this point, but I'll just say that for 12 months he was not able to work as pasticcere. And not knowing what the future would hold, he decided that in order to be able to provide for his family, always his main concern, perhaps it was time to focus on a new line of business. I won't go into that side. It's if anyone wants to know about it at a later stage, but we moved to Punch Bowl for a little while, and then we came back, and just a period that it was 12 months in between before he finally resumes his work as pasticcere. So one of his many 7-tier cakes that he'd like to make, the traditional torte there. Angelo resumes his work as pasticcere 12 months later. He realises there is a need to employ additional help in order to meet fast-growing demands for his cakes and pastries. 2 new pastry cooks, Bruno and Biagio, are employed and are taught by Angelo to bake the cakes and pastries strictly according to his recipes and style of baking. For a short period of time, between 1959 and 1962, premises at Punch Bowl become the main production centre for A and C Mezzapica. Angelo they bake the cakes in the bakehouse, and then he transports the cakes and pastries daily to the shop at Leichhardt. In 1962, Angelo buys the Leichhardt premises, the current Leichhardt premises, which include the corner property next door. He builds a large bakehouse extension at the back of the shop to cater for greater production, and an additional employee or 2 are hired. A and C Mezzapica now also changes its name to Mezzapica Continental Cakes. The business continues to grow in leaps and bounds, and the work becomes always more and more demanding. You recognise those? I'm sure many of you have tried them. In the mid-60s, Angelo's 15-year-old nephew, Franco Portelli, a recent arrival from Italy with his family, joins the team as an apprentice pastry cook. Also joining the team is Angelo's brother-in-law, Enzo Tonito. Prior to marrying my aunt Adalgisa Conti, whom you saw in the photo before, Enzo had worked at Beppy's restaurant in Sydney and had cake and pastry baking experience. In this environment of new staff, Angelo ensures that training is thorough. The Mezzapica recipes must always remain the same. This is the key to their popularity. Angelo never compromises on the quality of the ingredients and on the quality of the end product. He instills into all his employees the importance of maintaining the quality of product that clients are entitled to receive. His mantra, it's important to always taste the end product before selling it to the public. He was a stickler for that. They need to be tasted. Torte, cannoli, bignè, pastine, amaretti, toroncini, biscotti Napoli, pasticciotti, croccantini, etc., 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 are produced in ever-increasing quantities. And at Easter time, the production of the decorated marzipan pasta reale-based traditional Sicilian agnelli pasquali, or the Easter lambs, was always a special and anticipated event. I'm sure that many of you here will have fond memories of those beautifully decorated little lambs. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a photo of any of these in my collection. I did find some in Google Images, but none of those did justice to the Mezzapica finished product, so I chose not to include them. Clients continue to flock in from all over Sydney. Home deliveries are now available for orders to be delivered on Saturdays by Umberto Portelli, another of Angelo's nephews and Franco's brother. Mezzapica Continental Cakes increasingly supplies cakes for Italian weddings, christenings, confirmations, birthdays, for functions both in private homes and in numerous reception centres near and far. Cakes and pastry orders are also dispatched to places as far afield as Canberra, Wagga Wagga, Ulladulla, Griffith and Brisbane, to name a few, just a few. During the business growth period in the 60s, all members of our family, my mother, my little brother, myself, while still at school or through university years of study, together with other extended family members, we all pitch in to help when and where we can, whether it be serving in the shop or taking orders from clients, lending a hand in the workshop, filling cannoli shells, or preparing orders for clients to collect. It was a family affair. Mezzapica Continental Cakes is a thriving family business. I'm sure that there would be only very few Italian families in Sydney today that would not have had their share of Mezzapica cakes at some time. And of special mention, Mezzapica cakes. We were asked to prepare the torta for Pope Paul VI on the occasion of his papal visit in 1970. So, in 1970, Angelo decides it's now time for him to take a well-deserved break, confident that he can rely on his staff to work without him for a while. Together with my mother and brother, Angelo returns to his native Canneto, where he is able to reunite with his remaining family members for the first time since leaving Italy in 1949. Mezzapica Continental Cakes is entrusted to the capable hands of Enzo Tonito and Robert Iacono, my husband of 4 months, who had been working at Mezzapica Continental Cakes since our wedding date. Enzo looks after the production side and Robert takes charge of the sales and service areas. On Angelo's return some 3 months later, he makes the decision to semi-retire, leaving Enzo and Robert to continue to manage the business together for some years. Of course, it is just semi-retirement. Angelo is often on site to help out on busy times and always remains as mentor in the wings, making sure that everything is following what he's set in place. This is now Angela and Pina's time to focus on their interests and spend time with their now growing family of young grandchildren. One of Angela's passions is gardening. His love for growing flowers and maintaining a manicured garden was sparked not long after his arrival in Australia. After purchasing his first family home in Concord, he was introduced by his original employer, Dan Stokes, to Tompkins Nursery, now Flower Power at Enfield. I recall spending many Sunday afternoons there with Mum, Dad and Mark, choosing plants to grace our family home. And living in Abbotsford later on a large block of land after his retirement, he's able to relish the time he now has to spend in his beloved garden. Much to his surprise, on 2 different occasions his efforts are recognised with the presentation of 2 Garden Merit Awards by the Drummoyne Council mayors in office at that time. Okay, in the late 1970s, Enzo Tonito, with Angelo's blessing, decides to establish his own Tonito Cakes business in Port Kembla. Franco Portelli, the most appropriate person to be handed the reins of Mezzapica Continental Cakes, now buys the business from Angelo, his uncle, to whom he has given dedicated service from the age of 15 years of age. Franco Portelli is now, today, still at the helm of Mezzapica Cakes and continues to run it as a family business with his wife Marinella, brother-in-law Efisio and his wife Julianne. Together they proudly continue to follow the tradition of quality and service in the production of genuine Italian Sicilian cakes and pastries established by Angelo Mezzapica 64 years ago. They have also understood, however, the importance of keeping up with changes in demographics in order to evolve and to expand their products and services to cater to the needs of a larger, more varied clientele. Their recent opening of the modern and stylish Mezzapica Cake Studio at 133 Norton Street, just across the road from the main shop, bears witness to this, a very elegant shop front. In this studio, they offer personalised services to clients with special celebration cake needs, from weddings, birthdays and religious celebrations to retirements and corporate events. They also run cake decorating classes under the expert guidance of Mezzapica Cakes professionally trained pastry chefs and cake decorators for anyone wishing to enrol. Mezzapica Cakes today. Mezzapica Cakes is continually moving with the times, just as it did under Angelo's direction. Their web presence, together with all their social media followers on Facebook, are testament to their continued well-deserved success. Their website motto states, "A good reputation does not just happen, it must be earned." I think that both Angelo and Pina would be very proud of their achievements and continued success in carrying forward the Mezzapica name. And these are some of their... This was a very recent article online that had these images and a good story about the cake shop now. And that's Franco, of course, and the shop as it is now. Okay, my wrap-up. Before wrapping up, I would just like to add a few more personal words about our parents, Angelo and Pina. No doubt you will have gained a little understanding of Angelo's character by now. His life was by no means an easy life. He faced many challenges throughout his lifetime. However, he never gave up in the face of these challenges. He would just try to work out a better way to achieve a goal or think of an alternate strategy or project, even when it meant taking a total life-changing direction. Pina, our mother, was his true soulmate. Her gentle but strong character was always an unfailing support for our dad. She always took comfort in his goodness of heart, had great confidence in his capabilities in whatever he set his mind to do, and always stood by him through thick and thin. I think it's fair to say that my brother Mark and I grew up in awe of our father. It was not that we were afraid of him, it was just that he was a very quiet and unassuming man with a very strong character. We looked up to him. He was never one to scold us, but we knew that when he spoke, we shouldn't go against his wishes. When we needed to be brought into line for some misdemeanour, our mother was usually the one to do it. Angelo and Pina's 7-day-per-week work life meant that there really wasn't much time for us to socialise with extended family and friends as much as everyone else, although we weren't total hermits. In all honesty, though, I can't say that I enjoyed the hectic festive seasons of Christmas and Easter during the early and teen years of my life. I could only see the heavy toil that my father and mother had to endure while other families were all about enjoying these celebrations. Unfortunately, it's only in hindsight that we place such sacrifice and hard work into perspective. I consider that my brother and I have been very blessed in having been born to such wonderful parents whose sole dedication throughout their whole lifetime was to strive to ensure a better life and future for their children and grandchildren. It's with immense pride in their achievements that I have told the story tonight of Angelo and Carmela Mezzapica and the establishment of an icon, which Mezzapica Cakes has now become. Thank you for being here to listen to our story and for giving me the opportunity to share it with you.
This part wasn't rehearsed. I usually don't have a problem talking, but tonight Beatrice has just blown me away. She really has, and I think I could say that from everybody. Can we first give her a hand? I'm glad that she touched on other people as well that were involved in that giant migration, and one particular one which I hadn't really read the script that much in detail, but was my brother-in-law Antonio d'Ambra, and tonight his daughter's sitting here, Lisa. What I'd like to do now is, if anyone's got any questions for Beatrice, I'll wander through the crowd with a mic and you can ask some questions. Do we have any questions?
In it, but the blue Blue Star on Lyons Road at Abbotsford 5. Russell Lee is. Beg your pardon? Oh, I did it. I didn't know, but yes, he worked with Dad for many years.
Have a shop?
No, not as far as I'm aware. I don't know what happened to Bruno. He sort of left. He worked with Dad for a few years, but not a long time.
Hello, Beatrice. Thank you for that. That was a great story. First of all, your father's cabinets that he made, whatever happened to those?
They were probably replaced about 2 or 3 times after that, so I'm not sure whether... We did have some of them at home, I think, that we brought to my house at one stage, but they've
you
gone.
mentioned Enzo Tonito, because
Yes.
I'm from Wollongong.
Right.
And when I saw those photos up there, I went to many Italian weddings down there, and those cakes were very much what I saw.
Yes.
And now his son's taken over, and
Lorenzo, yeah.
and it's just not the same.
Oh.
I mean, no offence to Lawrence, but you know, like we tasted some of Enzo's cakes and Lawrence's cakes as well. So I'm so glad to have understood the connection.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
His brother-in-law.
Incidentally, we have 2 of Enzo's children here.
Oh, do you?
They'll probably be meeting you outside.
Beatrice, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the board on a very special talk. I think it's a part of our lives. Me growing up, I can remember visiting the family, going to the pastry shop, and now that I go back to Continental every year, I still have those feelings of remembrance. But as the director of Kaiser, I'd like to thank you very much for coming to present this story and the history that we've all grown up with, especially Aeolians, and we really appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
Alec Messina. just ask a question. When your dad was down with rheumatism and he's away from the shop, and this was the early days,
Yes.
how did the business carry on? You
He
couldn't
had
just...
hired one helper just before that, and as I mentioned, he'd hired a pastry cook because he was really quite busy, and he'd leased the shop to him for 1 year. So the shop carried on, and then Dad went back in and took ownership of it again. But he just couldn't work.
You mentioned how your dad made Australian cakes as well.
Yes.
What was his specialty?
People used to just rave about the meat pies, and they were all very disappointed when he sort of decided that he wasn't going to bake Australian cakes anymore. When because he had his regular clients, his sponges, whatever he made, he just. Everybody loved what he made, and he had his regular Leichhardt clients, and yeah.
Were cannoli one of your father's specialties? Were
Of
they the
course.
most
Of
biggest
course.
selling product?
Yeah, one of his specialties. But all of his cakes were, but the cannoli were really,
Seller? One of the biggest sellers?
one of the biggest. Yeah, they still are. Yeah, and I think in all fairness, I think Franco makes very good cannoli. Yeah, it still continues the tradition.
Just recently there was an article that a journalist wrote. One of the items mentioned was that they make 5,000 cannoli a week.
Wow.
Thanks, Auntie Beatrice. Firstly, Dad wants to know where you got the baby photo of him.
I had to hunt for that.
With a lovely dress.
And secondly, can you tell us the story of how Nonna and Nonna met together?
Oh, okay. She knew of the Mezzapica family. She knew a couple of the Mezzapica family members. She didn't know Angelo. Now, his older brother Giovannino was, apart from being a carpenter and working in the bar, and as they all did, they had multi-skills, was also the postman. And on a particular occasion, he asked Dad to fill in for him. And Dad had noticed Carmela Pina, and he actually wrote her a letter and left it as the postman leaves a letter. And I believe that when she read that letter, she blushed and she didn't know who he was, and she got all excited, and he was telling her that he was interested in her, and at that stage as well, my grandfather was not in Italy. I think he might have been, because my grandfather, Mum's father, made a couple of trips to Australia and back to Italy on a number of occasions. This particular time he was in Australia. And so as was the custom in those days, you had to get parental approval, So I think my mother sort of sent a discreet reply saying that, well, she couldn't entertain the thought because her father was overseas. But then I've since found a letter that my dad says, you've got uncles and relatives there who can speak on your behalf. So, and that's how the relationship started. But, everyone still came back to Mezzapica. So, what can I tell you?
I remember meeting you, and I have 6 brothers and sisters, and we always had a Mezzapica cake for the baptism, for the christening, and the cannoli were always a very special part of it. And I remember when I met you, your name was very famous. And do you remember one of the boys in our Italian class called you, he said your name means that you're half a pica. It was lovely to see you. It was a lovely talk. I'm so pleased we came.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you.
I'd like to know, is your mum and dad, I'm sorry to say this, but are they deceased or are they
Yes,
still alive?
yeah. My father passed away in 1997 and Mum in 2003. So that's why I feel, quite close to this story. I think the story needs to be told.
Oh, and also, I think at my wedding I had one of your father's cakes. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I've got to tell you, he made the cake at my wedding.
Thank you. Thank you.
The meeting
meeting tonight is not conducted exactly the way it was supposed to be by the President, but nevertheless he's not here, and I thought he mightn't know about it, but he will because it's all recorded. So I probably will never speak again here. But I want everyone to feel under their seat, the seat you're sitting on, not the one next to you. That's the lucky door prize tonight. Okay, we're going to draw the first prize.
It's a blue C01. Purple C99.
Rigged chance.
Do a redraw.
Okay. Blue C91.
Somebody must have it. Maria.
Got it?
Yes.
Right, is that it? Right, okay, good, thank you.
Purple C90.
This is becoming a bit of a family affair, and I'm telling you, it's not rigged. Truly, it's not.
Wonderful.
Thank you for coming tonight, and thanks for putting on such a good show. And there's a little gift from us.
Oh, thank you.
Not that you're not a bad cook, but that'll teach you to even be better. I'd like to just thank somebody very special here tonight, and that's Tony Luciano, who's sitting up the back in the director's chair. And he's responsible for the film you saw earlier tonight and the many other films that we've showed here over the months and the years. Thanks, Tony, for being such a staunch helper. So thank you again for coming. What a wonderful audience we've had tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. And please come again next month. Thank you.